They laughed when he said he was investing only $100. Too small, they told him. You need real money to get rich. But in the summer of 1975, Elias Verma didn't listen. He wasn't looking for the next Apple or Tesla. He didn't even dream of wealth. He just wanted to see what would happen if patience, not luck, decided the outcome. He took his $100, a single green bill folded twice, and placed it into a simple fund that mirrored the stock market. No fancy strategies, no trading, no noise. Then he did the hardest thing a person can do with money. He left it alone. 50 years later, that quiet act of faith had turned into more than $34,000, assuming dividends reinvested. Adjusted for inflation, it still crushed the value of cash. Elias hadn't predicted anything. He had simply started, and while others waited for the perfect moment, he proved the smallest step is the one most people never take. It wasn't about timing the market. It was about trusting time itself. Before that quiet $100 decision, Elias Verma lived in a small brick apartment on the east side of Detroit, the kind of place where you could hear the hum of the factory siren before dawn and the sound of tired footsteps after sunset. His father had worked those same lines for 30 years, tightening bolts on cars he could never afford. His mother kept the family alive with coupons and prayer. Money, in his house, wasn't a conversation, it was a weight. Every dollar had a job before it even reached their hands. So when Elias got his first paycheck at 23, he didn't think about investing. He thought about surviving. Rent, groceries, gas, maybe a small gift for his mother. That was it. But 1975 was a year of contradictions. The economy was shaky. Inflation was climbing. People whispered that the American dream was slipping through their fingers. And yet, every morning, Elias saw men spend their lunch breaks arguing about which car company stock would explode next. They talked about risk as if it were a lottery ticket. Most of them never invested a dime. Elias was different. He didn't see money as power, he saw it as time. He had watched his father age under fluorescent lights, trading years for a steady paycheck that never stretched far enough. He promised himself he wouldn't live that way forever. So one night, sitting at a small kitchen table with a yellowed newspaper, Elias circled an article that mentioned something called a market index fund. It sounded boring, almost invisible, but it made sense. Instead of chasing one company, you owned a small piece of many. No gambling, no guessing, just growth. He didn't know much about Wall Street. He didn't even own a calculator. But he understood one thing. If he could let time do the work, maybe he wouldn't have to. He took $100, nearly half his monthly rent, and walked into a local brokerage. The clerk barely looked up when he handed over the cash. To them, it was nothing. To Elias, it was everything. That single act became a quiet rebellion. In a world obsessed with getting rich fast, he chose to get rich slow. He kept working at the factory by day, learning by night. He read library books about compound interest and wrote notes in the margins like prayers, "Let time be my ally." He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He just kept showing up to work, to save, to learn. Years later, when others complained about rising prices, Elias didn't panic. He'd built a small emergency fund, paid off his debts, and stayed consistent with his tiny investments. His wealth wasn't loud. It was patient, and it began with a man who simply refused to let fear make his decisions. By the mid-1990s, the world around Elias Verma had changed. Factories were closing. Computers were replacing hands. And the young men who once mocked his small investments now watched stock tickers scroll across television screens with envy and disbelief. Elias, meanwhile, sat quietly at his kitchen table, the same table from 20 years before, sipping black coffee as numbers turned into proof. His $100 had long multiplied. Every dividend was reinvested, every check reinvested again. He never chased hot tips or traded on rumors. He simply followed a rhythm, steady, dull, relentless. And that dullness made him rich in a way most people would never understand. By 2000, the fund he'd bought in 1975 had ballooned. The market had roared through the 80 seconds and 90 seconds. Elias never sold. While others celebrated short-term wins, he celebrated consistency. He lived modestly, same home, same car, same worn-out jacket. He didn't need anyone to see his success. He only needed to feel his freedom. Then came the crash of 2001. Panic filled the air. Neighbors lost half their savings. Elias lost money too, on paper. But instead of fear, he felt something rare, calm. He'd been preparing for this his entire life. He knew the market would rise again because it always had. And when it did, He would be there quietly buying while others were selling. By 2010, the internet boom had changed everything. Elias was older now, his hair thinning, his hands slower, but his principles sharper than ever. He spent his mornings teaching neighborhood kids how to open their first brokerage accounts, not to impress them, but to free them. He showed them charts of the S&P 500, explained how index funds like VTI and SPY mirrored the economy's heartbeat. He'd trace his finger over the lines, smile, and say, "It's not magic, it's time." His small network of students began calling him Mr. Verma the timekeeper. They said he could see the future. He laughed at that. He wasn't predicting anything, just obeying a law most people ignored. Save, invest, repeat. By 2020, his account statements read numbers he'd never imagined. 6 digits turned into 7. He wasn't a billionaire, but he didn't need to be. He had no debt. His savings could weather storms. His investments were earning while he slept. He'd reached a point few ever touch quiet wealth. Yet, deep down, he felt a strange emptiness. He looked at his account balance and wondered if money had become too silent. The world was louder than ever. Crypto millionaires, meme stocks, overnight traders bragging about impossible returns. He saw himself in their impatience, and it frightened him. Had the lesson of time been forgotten? He began writing a journal he titled, "The Discipline of Delay." In it, he wrote, "Wealth is not what grows in your account, it's what grows inside your patience." At 70, Elias Verma stood at the peak of a mountain no one else could see. No spotlight, no applause, just freedom, the kind that comes from never rushing what was meant to take time. In the spring of 2022, the world around Elias began to spin faster than he could follow. The markets that had once rewarded patience now seemed addicted to speed. Every headline shouted about crypto fortunes, meme stocks, and overnight millionaires. The noise was relentless, the very opposite of everything he had built his life upon. Elias had survived recessions, bubbles, and panics, but this time felt different. He was no longer fighting the market, he was fighting time itself. Technology moved faster than discipline could catch it. Artificial intelligence, algorithms, digital trading bots, they all promised what patience once delivered. At first, Elias dismissed it. He believed fundamentals never changed. But one day, his old student, now a young entrepreneur, came to visit. She showed him how she used AI to analyze markets, generate reports, even predict trends. She'd turned a $10,000 portfolio into 6 figures within a year. Elias listened politely, but when she left, he sat in silence for a long time. For the first time in decades, he felt outdated. He opened his account later that night. His portfolio was solid, broad, balanced, untouched. But the charts on his screen told another story. The market had slipped nearly 20% since January. Inflation was surging again. Headlines screamed recession. The same patience that once made him wealthy now felt like a curse. He tried to ignore the fear, but something inside him shifted. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was pride. He began checking his account every morning, something he hadn't done in 50 years. Every dip felt personal. Every red number, a whisper. Maybe you're too old for this game. Then came the letter. His brokerage firm, one he had trusted since the 70 seconds, was merging with a tech-based platform. The message promised a seamless AI-powered investing experience. It sounded efficient. It also sounded foreign. He wasn't angry, just tired. For the first time, he wondered if his kind of investor had gone extinct. In late 2023, he made a decision he thought he'd never make. He sold half his holdings. Not because he needed the money, he didn't, but because he wanted control. He told himself it was rebalancing. But deep down, it was fear dressed as logic. The man who once preached patience was now doubting it. When the market recovered in 2024, his heart sank. The same funds he'd abandoned roared back to life. He had missed the rebound he had always waited for. For the first time, he felt the sharp sting of irony the teacher had broken his own rule. That winter, Elias stopped checking the markets altogether. He went back to reading books, the old kind with yellow pages and quiet lessons. In the margins, he wrote only one sentence. "I built my fortune on time and I lost my peace when I stopped trusting it." The fall of Elias Verma wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in doubt, and that loss was far heavier than any market crash. After the fall of 2024, Elias Verma began to travel. Not out of luxury, but out of curiosity. He wanted to see how the world thought about money, how others faced the same fears he had lived through. He packed a small suitcase, closed his laptop, and left Detroit for the first time in years. In New York, He saw what America had become, a country built on motion. Screens blinked with numbers that never slept. People measured their success in percentages and followers. Everyone was chasing returns, not reasons. In coffee shops, he overheard investors discussing AI-driven arbitrage, quantum trading, instant yield. No one mentioned patience anymore. The American dream had evolved, or maybe mutated, into a race of restless ambition. Then he flew to Tokyo. There, he found quiet order. Investors still talked about growth, but they spoke of legacy, not leverage. A banker told him, "We don't invest for our lifetime. We invest for the family name." In Japan, wealth was a slow river, not a rising wave. It wasn't about beating the market, it was about surviving it. Elias realized how rare that mindset had become back home. In Germany, he met a group of young engineers who pooled their savings each month into an index fund. They called it the Freedom Pot. When he asked them what they'd do with the money someday, they laughed and said, "We don't plan to spend it. We plan to inherit peace." It struck him their idea of wealth wasn't accumulation. It was continuity. A bridge between generations, not a race between individuals. But it was in India where the lesson hit deepest. In a small village outside Mumbai, he sat with a farmer who saved the equivalent of $2 a week. When Elias told him about the power of compounding, the man smiled and said, "I already believe in that. That's how I grow my crops." Elias watched the farmer gesture to a field of green, patient, silent, inevitable. The principle was the same: plant, wait, trust. As he returned to America, Elias realized something unsettling. His country had mastered the science of money, but forgotten its spirit. People here could trade faster, analyze deeper, automate smarter, yet still feel poorer. Because wealth without patience is like growth without roots, impressive, but fragile. Sitting on the plane, he scribbled in his journal, "The rest of the world grows money like a tree. America grows it like a fire. Both give light, only one endures." When he landed back in Detroit, he didn't check the markets. He simply walked past the glowing screens, carrying a different kind of currency perspective. He no longer wanted to beat time. He wanted to live with it. In the spring of 2025, Elias Verma sat once again at the same wooden table where everything had begun. 50 years earlier, he had placed $100 into the market, not knowing it would outlive his doubts, his fears, even his ambition. Now the house was quiet. His hands, older and slower, rested beside the same yellowed newspaper that had once sparked his curiosity. He looked at his account statement one last time. The numbers glowed faintly on the screen: $3 million, $100,000, a lifetime of patience, discipline, and time. But what struck him most was not the amount. It was the memory of the man who started with almost nothing and never gave up on something invisible. Outside, the neighborhood had changed. New houses, new cars, new debts. He saw young faces racing through life, chasing the same illusion he once did. They believed freedom came from speed. He knew now it came from stillness. He began writing letters not to investors or banks, but to his students. Each one began the same way: "Do not wait until you have enough. Start while you still have fear." He told them about the $100 experiment, about the years when everyone said it was pointless. He told them about 2024, when he doubted himself and lost his peace. And he told them about the morning he forgave himself, the day he realized wealth was never about money. It was about time spent without worry. One of his former students, now a teacher herself, visited him that summer. She brought her young son, who asked, "Mr. Verma, what's the secret to being rich?" Elias smiled. He handed the boy a coin and said, "Don't spend this. Not because it's worth much, but because one day you'll remember the choice not to." When the boy left, Elias walked outside. The sky looked almost identical to the one in 1975. He realized that the world had always moved fast. It was only his heart that had learned to slow down. He no longer cared about charts or interest rates. His wealth now lived in the quiet moments between sunrise and coffee. That night, he closed his journal with one final line: "Freedom is not built in a year. It is built in the years you refuse to give up." Weeks later, the local library where he used to read began hosting a small investing club in his honor. On the wall above the door, someone painted a quote from his journal: "He didn't buy freedom, he built it, one quiet choice at a time."